children communicate harm,
Mm.
uh, and obviously not all, unwanted child behaviours. They are about communicating their unmet needs or communicating their feelings. Not all of that is about child protection issues or child abuse. For children that do experience abuse or harm, their communication is usually through behaviour, through emotion and behavioural language, through non-verbal cues. And there was, I know I'm going off on a different track now, but out of the Royal Commission report a number of years ago now in Australia, and there's other similar research in other parts of the world as well, where it can take on average 20 years for somebody to disclose child abuse. So that means that they're an adult when they disclose. What those reports and the research aren't recognising is that children are always communicating harm, don't know how to, aren't understanding their language and aren't seeing it as language and being inquisitive about, hey, something's not okay here, what's going on for the child. So children disclose much,
Yeah.
much earlier than 20 years.
We're just not listening. We just don't know
We're
how
not listening.
we don't know how to hear it. We don't know how to see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that like once leads me to ask you, because I know that you've been working like in this field for over 30 years, and like more recently you've been doing a lot more of the consulting and training for professionals, and developing a program, I think. Can you talk more about that because I think we spoke the other day and you had said something about we can only do as much as we know, like we can, but not just professionals, also because we're talking about the community. What do we need to do, and what are you doing in that space?
Yeah,
Because I think that's
and the same
important
principles
work.
for parents, for family members, for the community, for professionals. It's become more
Yeah.
conscious in our own reactions and how we're processing what's going on around us, and also how we're noticing what's going on around us. Today is Are You OK Day.
I was like,
Some people might not realise,
yeah,
and it's like, there's kids around us that how often do we say, hey, are you okay? Just
yeah,
checking that you're okay today, and being willing to listen. I've gone off track a little bit, which
no, no,
I always
that's
do, but it's becoming more conscious,
conscious.
and that we can only take people as far as we've gone ourselves.
Yeah,
We can't
that's
take
what you
people
said.
further. So it's not possible to take people further than what we've gone ourselves. So we need to
Exactly.
become really reflective in our own thinking, our own
Yeah,
processes, our own defence mechanisms, the myths that we believe, and starting to kind of identify the things that we believe that aren't actually true, but we have believed it
the
because someone
condition.
told us it.
Yeah, the
No,
conditioning.
it's like children don't disclose for an average of 20 years. That's research, but I think it's a myth,
Yeah,
and and when we realise that, then we become more consciously
yeah,
aware of kids' behaviours and what they're
yeah,
communicating. But
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's like you made a really good point around, and I think that leads into the systematic issues. And so we're talking about, like, research says that this is what's happening, but okay, does that mean that that's gospel? Like, does that mean that we just believe that? And does that mean that we actually challenge the way that things are and challenge the system? And so I know we spoke briefly about like the system and the way it works, and the social workers and all the case managers and people that work in this field. What do we need to change? Or I suppose, like, what were we saying? You were saying that it's not a broken system. No, I said it's not a something. It's a broken system. And so how do we fix that? Like, where do we go from there to kind of increase that awareness? Because if we don't fix it, the things are going to keep going the way that they are. And I think it brings it into that holistic approach where you're saying around, we need to, as practitioners and as individuals, we need to become more conscious because it starts with us.
yeah.
Yeah,
And conscious of, because so the system's made up of so many different things. So it's made up of policies and procedures and rules, and this is how we do things, and this is how we do assessment, and this is the boxes we must tick. And so the system's made up of that, and it's also made up of people, managers, executive people, CEOs, government, and it's made up of clients and families and communities. So the system's quite wide, really. I think that the issues they don't just sit in the professional system, they sit in the wider political, community, family, and organisational system. And I think it's more, rather than fixing it, it's about becoming more aware of how it's operating and where it's not working well together. And becoming more aware of what we're doing and why. And in that organisational space, I think it's changing. I've noticed it's changing, but there's a real disconnect between yourself as a person and yourself as a professional. So it's kind of like you put on this other persona, you put on this professional hat, a professional mask, you learn the language, and you know what to say, you know how to keep getting paid, and you do care about your job as well. But it's like you are a professional in this space, and at home you're somebody else, and there's that disconnect, rather than seeing that when we work with families in the professional space, we bring ourselves into it. We bring our thoughts, we bring our understanding, we bring the myths that we believe that we haven't worked out of myths, we bring our experiences. So we bring all that into the space, and we need to connect the personal and the professional more, and that can only come through becoming more consciously aware. Because there is a disconnect. You are the social worker, you are the child protection worker, not, Nikki or Tash, who has a passion for kids and experiences yourself, and plus all the professional training. It's
and I think that's a really good point, because obviously in certain industries you have your professional hat and then you have your work hat, and some would argue that you don't want to mesh the two, because you want to maintain you want to preserve your own mental and emotional well-being and health, and you don't want to lead to burnout. So what would be your sort of recommendation or ideas around how do we connect the two? Because of obviously the work we do is humanitarian work, it's support for communities and people. How do we mesh the two without burning ourselves out? And because one of the biggest issues that I've seen working in the field is that everyone's tired, everyone's angry, everyone's burnt out, everyone's overworked. And so what do we do? Like, how do we make this a better place?
Well, I think it's the fact that we aren't aligned with ourselves in those roles, and we aren't acknowledging the personal. I think that's what's creating the burnout, not the other way around. I'm not advocating for we need to go into those professional spaces and tell everybody all of our life experiences and go and be too personal in our work. But we need to acknowledge that we are there with our own experiences and thinking and passions and the way that we see things. And it's that suppression. We can't be honest about, oh, I really don't want to see that family scares me, that family gives me anxiety, I really can't handle listening to another case of child abuse. We can't be fully open and honest about those things, so we disconnect from ourselves to try and manage the job. And I think that's what creates the burnout.
That's such an interesting take, and I think one that is not spoken about as much, and leads into that embodiment and that really connecting to your authentic self, and knowing who you are as a person, and being more inquisitive, because when you know yourself better, you live a more aligned life, and you take aligned action a lot more than if you're just kind of going with the motions, going with the flow, and not really knowing. So that's a really interesting point.
So that's part of the thing, because it's a gap. It's a gap in practice, and it's a burnout and secondary trauma from working in the child protection space and the mental health space, adults or kids, is on the increase. Some research coming out of Australia and New Zealand now is showing that half of the workers are showing symptoms of burnout.
Mm,
That's huge. And
mm,
so there's more work that the community complexity has grown since 2020. There's mental health, childhood,
yeah.
and are expected to be able to
Yeah.
manage all of this high
Yes.
complexity stuff. But if we had a, a genuine space to really
Mm,
say, I'm so overwhelmed here. I really don't like this work, or,
yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
it is, and be able to talk that through and process it.
Yeah.
This is why it becomes secondary
Yeah.
trauma, because it becomes suppressed
Yeah.
until the person breaks down and
Yeah.
can't manage their job anymore.
Absolutely, and it gives me flashbacks to it's a very much like it is what it is mentality. Like people will be like, oh, this is just the way that it is. Like I know it sucks. I know you're working super late and you're trauma
Yeah.
informed is one thing, but being trauma transformative is another. So can you like can we speak about that, and then we can probably
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about your program, and then we can probably finish up because I feel like yeah.
It's so exciting you're on the other side of the world, by the way.
I know
As a
I'm just
side
like
note, you're
sitting
like
in
living
this
my dream.
dingy
um,
suburb in Rome,
so,
but
so trauma informed has become the in language and way of thinking, and it's absolutely vital that we are trauma informed. But in trauma informed principles, the unintended consequences that people aren't thinking about. Um, is that one of the principles is to do no further harm. And so people end up not wanting to talk with somebody about their trauma. They don't want to ask kids certain questions about their experiences at home, for example, because they don't want to do any further harm. They don't want to trigger someone. I don't like that word. That's really about your nervous system being activated, and so they don't want to trigger people. They don't want to do any further harm. So they end up not talking about the real things for that person. And so again, they become more silenced and the trauma becomes suppressed, it becomes embodied. They might even forget, consciously forget what's happened, and it still, becomes suppressed within their subconscious mind. So trauma informed has been aware that trauma impacts all of us, and it's about doing no further harm. But trauma transformative is about believing that there is post-trauma growth. We can move through trauma. We can release trauma. But if we can't talk about trauma, how can we release it? And so trauma transformative is about, it's not that somebody needs fixing, it needs that they need to be able to release that trauma that has become embodied and has become suppressed within their subconscious mind. And then they can embrace new ways of living, thinking, being, which is part of the process, but it's having that, trauma informed has become the end goal,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
not.
yeah,
It's like we want post-trauma
yeah.
growth.
We want to see you
Yeah,
thrive after this. We don't want to see and us. We don't want it to just end there. Like, oh, you've been traumatized. Okay, let's be careful. Let's be mindful. Let's be kind and empathetic. But that's where it ends. Okay, so we're almost enabling or like I said, accepting that that's the way it's going to be forever,
yeah,
and giving them this,
yeah,
giving our clients or giving ourselves or giving our whoever we're speaking to this sense that oh, this thing's happened to you in your life and this is the way it's going to be forever. Like deal
yeah,
with it. Yeah, so yeah,
yeah.
that's a really, really good point, and I think that needs to be spoken about more. And I think that's what you're doing in your package, which is really
Yeah,
cool.
that's my whole kind of vision, or part of it actually. I have
Yeah,
lots of visions and passions. Yeah, to believe in people, to know that there is a point beyond feeling overwhelmed by trauma.
yeah,
Trauma is connected to a memory and usually connected to fear. And that can you know, be in somebody's kind of thinking and behaviours and the way they embrace life for many, many years. There is a place beyond that, and your experiences you can never change. You might reframe them, and you
Yeah,
might start to think about them differently, but
yeah,
you can't change them, and
actually,
we don't need to change them.
yeah, yeah,
And there's also that myth that trauma is inherently bad.
yeah,
And yes, toxic stress can result in poor health outcomes. We know that through a lot of research. Trauma can also build or create
mm,
resilience, empathy,
mm,
compassion. You know, trauma, yeah, everyone experiences some form of trauma in their life.
yeah,
And it is part of human experience. Some traumas should never happen, like child abuse should never happen.
yeah,
But it does happen. It doesn't mean that, you know, that person can also glean gems out of that, and it's hard for people to comprehend that.
yeah,
But there can be, um, yeah, there can be, it can increase resilience.
mm,
People can end up thinking, wow, I am so strong. I got through that. Now I understand it for others. You
yeah,
know, it's seeing, yeah, transforming trauma
absolutely,
from it being inherently bad to
yeah,
something that creates a new and amazing
yeah.
life.
Because at the end of the day, like trauma's on a spectrum, right? And it goes from like the smallest to the most, the worst. And everyone, I feel like, and the yeah, like you said, it's a part of the human experience. Absolutely, everyone has experienced some form, whether that's at the smallest, the lowest end or the highest end. You know,
The little
the
T.
little T or the big T. And I know there's some people who don't like that term, like little T or big T, because I think some people think like, well, complex trauma is like, you know, these really horrendous experiences, and you know, trauma is very loosely thrown around on social media and things like that as well. So I understand that perspective as well, but I do believe that there's a spectrum to it. So like when we talk about little
Mm,
T, we're usually talking about not necessarily abuse or things like that, but more unmet needs, unmet emotional needs that create coping mechanisms and belief systems that then
yeah,
create people who then have these, you know, like you said, the road rage, and like, why is that, you know, why do
yeah,
certain people have people pleasing tendencies, and they're not able to, why do they struggle with confrontation, why do they struggle with all
yeah,
these different things? It's like it all goes back to a message that was sent to you as a child at some point in your
absolutely.
life. Yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's a really good point. And there was something else
yeah.
I've forgotten now.
Well,
um
we wake up each morning and we embrace the day
yeah,
based on our past experiences.
yeah,
And that's why we do the same thing when we wake up. We check our phone. You know, we do the same thing. And
yeah,
Joe Dispenza talks about a lot of that
yeah,
stuff because our
yeah,
emotions and
in this
how we
last.
embrace our day is based on our past experiences.
And yeah, and when you
Um,
think, and like even in oh, a lot of people say it, but something I was reading yesterday, and it was like trauma. When you've experienced trauma, a lot of the times you remain stuck in that time frame. You not able to actually move past and live in the present, and you're not able to actually live in the present. Oh, live in the present, be present, be here. It's like I can't. I actually can't, because I'm stuck in that time where this thing happened to me, and that's all I know, and that's all that's comfortable and safe for me, because
yeah,
everything else feels unfamiliar. So it's almost like they find safety in the pain, because it's familiar, because anything else beyond that is
yeah,
too scary to kind of approach, if that makes sense. I think a lot about like
it
people who
does.
grow up in
Yeah,
dysfunctional or chaotic families, when they are treated with kindness or respect or really like a calm situation, they're like, how do I deal with this? Like, I've never learned how to deal with this because chaos was my normal. That's my
yeah,
comfortable, that's my familiar. Is it the best? Am I thriving? No, but this is what's comfortable for me, so I'm actually scared to move past this.
yeah.
It's really
And some
interesting.
people are scared to believe that things could be better or that they could feel different because there's that fear that once you believe and something bad happens
Yeah.
again, it's going to feel worse than
Worse.
just living in the
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
know how this feels. It feels like shit, but it's at least I know how it feels. What if I do
yeah,
something and it's going to be even worse? And it's that fear of the unknown and that fear of what, yeah. And it's like that when people say, oh, well, what if it doesn't work out? And it's like, well, what if it does? they're not really able to see that's too scary to think about the what if it does. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
interesting.
that's right. Because you don't want to be let down again, and that's
No,
part of it. You don't want to be, um, yeah, you don't want to be hurt again. So it's easier to live in the existing hurt than to create a new one,
yeah,
which is like compounding trauma and compounding pain. Yeah, I think we steered a bit away from child protection, but it does bring us back to the child within us all,
I think it's
you know, and
yeah,
having empathy for the kids that are around us, and wanting the kids around us to have to have amazing
yeah.
experiences in their life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it all connects. Like, yeah, we might have swayed from talking about the children in our lives, but when we, like you said, talking about the child within us and actually working on ourselves, it starts with us. We actually have to start with us for us to be able to then support others. And like
Yeah.
you can only go as far as you've gone yourself. So how do you expect to, support other people, children, adults, children, whoever, if you're not able to do the same for yourself? So I think it really starts with that self
Yeah.
inquiry and that compassionate inquiry into yourself. So you have to like really inquire into why you are the way you are, but with love and understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
will create that empathy for others.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
it changes the way you see the world, because I think when you've experienced trauma, you view the world through the lens of that experience. And so you can't see
Yeah.
past that. The world looks like a grey place. And it just, however you've experienced whatever you experienced, that's how you see the world. That's how you perceive everything. And so
Yeah.
it starts with yourself. Yeah, such a good point.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like there's so much else that we could talk about, but we should
Yeah.
probably end it there. Is there anything else you wanted to share or talk about? I know you're doing something really exciting for professionals and working on packages and things like that. Is that something that you're going to be working on for just Queensland, or is that is that Australia wide, or what does that look
No,
like? Because I know I don't
I'm,
have anyone here, but I've got a lot of social workers on my Instagram, and I feel like a lot of people
yeah,
would be working for agencies who would love to be able to be a part of that, who want to have a more holistic approach to their practice.
yeah. So I'm delivering, it's my side business because I work full time for
Yeah,
yeah, it's that organization that you used to work at
yeah.
as well that we didn't even know.
That's
We
so
didn't know
cool.
each other back then.
Yeah, very
Um,
interesting. Yeah, I found you through Instagram because my coworker has sent us like, oh, this person has Instagram, and I was like, oh my gosh, you works at the same agency, and then I left because I came to Europe, and then we just ended up talking. So it's just very interesting how people connect, and I think it all happens
yeah.
for a reason.
So my side biz, my side consulting biz is something I'm slowly growing, but I have just sold 2 packages, and one of them is around professional well-being, and it's that it's about preventing burnout and secondary trauma by increasing our mental strength and emotional resilience. And for that, I've developing a whole conscious practice framework because we can't increase emotional resilience and mental strength without becoming more conscious in our practice, and it's beyond self-care. People have talked about self-care in organizations for years. It's beyond that. It's about really intentional mental strength building, because if we don't do that in this and with the complexities that are becoming more complex, we're going to have more and more people burn out,
Absolutely.
and plus when people start to become burnout, they aren't providing the services as well as they could to the families and to the kids and to the young people that need it. The other one is around professional dangerousness, which is also about acknowledging and identifying our unconscious processes in the
Yes.
professional context where our defense mechanisms kick
Yeah.
in, and our cognitive bias,
Yeah.
and kind of what drives that, and becoming more, again, is about becoming more conscious and being more reflective in our work. Um, it's my favorite course topic, and something I've been talking about for many, many years, but something that a lot of people have. I think it's starting to increase, people starting to become more conscious in their practice.
Yeah,
Um, People are having to because burnout's on the increase.
yeah,
And so,
yeah.
yeah,
And I think that's such, yeah, and that's such a good point, and so good to see, like, from your perspective, that you're seeing that it is becoming more common, because it is something that I feel like is sometimes, I don't know, I feel like people who are very, maybe have been in the industries for a long time or stuck in their ways will think it's very woo-woo. Oh, like collective consciousness,
yeah,
more conscious, like my unconscious biases. No, I just show up and I follow the book and I do the job and I care for, and then I go home. And it's like, no, I think that it's a lot deeper than that, and
yeah,
maybe we could start working on not having so much turnover and not having so many resignations in these fields if people were actually more connected to their authentic self and understanding their own, unconscious beliefs and systems, so that they have that resilience to be able to work with people consistently over time.
yeah,
um so
yeah.
good point.
And know that it's okay to not be okay.
Exactly.
It's okay to be struggling as a practitioner. It's normal. You're a human,
Yeah,
you're not like a superhuman or,
absolutely. Yeah.
um, and normalizing the complexities of working in that
Yeah.
space. And that's something that hasn't been done well.
No.
Um, we're expected to be superhuman
And a
almost.
lot of agencies, organizations, whatever, like companies, I feel like talk, you like you said, talk a lot about self-care, and like talk to your manager if you're feeling like you're struggling. But those are just words. I feel a lot of the time they're not. It's that's not embodied. That space isn't shared. Like, I know I've spoken to multiple people who in the past who have said, like, I was struggling but I didn't feel like I could say anything because it would have made me seem incompetent, or they would have said to me, oh, you just have to deal with it or you leave, like, you maybe not. One of the things I noticed is that whenever someone would quit, the way that they were spoken about was, oh, they couldn't handle it, like it was just too much.
Yeah,
And it was this negative, approach to this person who probably wanted to reach out, and I know people who have reached out multiple times that I'm struggling, and
yeah,
they'd be like, what can I do, how can I help you? But the thing is, it's a flow-on effect. Like, that team leader who's like trying to help that case manager also is struggling, and then their managers also. So it's like a flow-on effect of people who are all struggling and don't have safe spaces to be able to share and actually collaborate. So that makes it, like, collaborate and actually
yeah,
move towards a better work environment. And that's why it happens. And it's a shame, because I remember when I left one of my jobs, I was like, oh, actually, like, I love this job, but I'm burnt out and I feel like I can't keep doing this. And it was heartbreaking.
yeah.
Yeah.
And people don't know what to do with the burnout. The person experiences doesn't, know how to get through it, and often doesn't know. And, managers often don't know how to support them through that either.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced burnout symptoms myself before. There was a period of time where I was crying every single day, and it was just so hard to be motivated. I felt so sad. I felt so isolated. I was in a key role, so I couldn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
And when I did tell someone about it, they took 3 weeks to get back to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then I had to start looking in external places. I went and had some very unhelpful counselling. And then what really
That's a
helped
big
me
deal.
is I went and paid for personal coaching.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. It was the best investment I've ever
Yeah.
made. And
Crazy.
I got out of that kind of burnt out, sad space.
That's really good.
Um, yeah, burnout really can really impact. And then the kids and the people that we're
Mhm.
supporting um, miss out on our services.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
can, yeah, again, we can only give as much as we have to give. And if all of our energy is going into, stressing and stressing about situations and not having that consistent support network to be able to maintain our own well-being, how are we supposed to fill? It's like that, fill up your own cup before you fill up anybody else's.
Yeah.
And that's in your personal life and your professional life, and it's really interesting that you make the point about the coaching as well, because there's so much stigma around coaches and things like that, oh, well, therapy is like the only way. And I have heard so many people have so many negative experiences with counselors and therapy, and I'm like, I think this is also part of the issue, is that that's a whole other thing. I just think that's also part
Yeah,
of the issue. You know, that's also
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there's
But
just
it's identifying what you need, and we need to identify what we need, especially when no one else is helping or identifying it for us.
exactly.
And I think that's part of what I'm doing with a transformative approach to practice. And if we don't transform the way that we think about people ourselves, it's like we need to go inward before we can
Go
be
outward.
effective outward.
Yeah, yeah,
And if we really want to transform people's lives, we have to transform how we see these people, what we believe about them, what we believe is, possible. And there are, in that kind of professional context, often it's trying to get to a point that's good enough. What's good enough for these kids? What's good enough parenting? What's safe enough? Rather than what's amazing for them. And until we transform the way we think, what we think is possible, we can't take people beyond that.
very true.
And it doesn't mean everybody's going to go beyond
Yeah,
it,
but it's having that. It's
but we
having that
need to at least,
hope
we
for it.
need to do that work ourselves. So, now this isn't me advertising, but what I'm really hoping to do next year is to run a retreat for practitioners, social workers, psychologists. I haven't really thought it through well. I thought it would be, just beautiful to get people together that work in the mental health space, the child protection space, and bringing the personal and the professional together, forming new connections, being able to talk about the real parts of the jobs and how it impacts us, and being able to come away from that retreat, whether it's a day or 2 days, feeling refreshed, feeling heard, feeling valued, and having renewed energy to go back out there, because the community needs, child abuse isn't going to go away. I'm a realist. If we need to start doing a huge amount more work in the community to think that we can eliminate child abuse. And even if we start now and we start doing it really, really well, it's going to take, a generation or two before we can get to the elimination
Absolutely.
phase.
It honestly goes back to yourself, because you have to change the cycle for yourself so that you can continue on that cycle of healing and growth.
Yeah.
So if we don't change our behaviors and don't change the way that we treat our children, and then they treat their children, and then it's never going to stop, right? So
Yeah.
it starts with us, as
Yeah.
an individual as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we impart it to the parents that we work with and the people that we work with around their mental health as well.
Such a good point.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of moving parts to it. So it's like, as a individual, and then as a professional, and then as a community, it's all so interconnected. And I think good point. Yeah, amazing. Anyway, I think that was really exciting. It was really fun to talk to you, and I think that's pretty much all we probably have time for. We've gone way over the 20 minutes that we wanted to do this. Definitely more than 20 minutes.
Once you start me on these subjects, I could just talk for hours.
No, I love that. And I'm so excited to hear more about all of your packages and programs that you're coming out with. And the retreat sounds amazing, and I think that's going to be incredible. Like, I think that's something that's very much needed in the field. And I think people in these fields don't get that sort of treatment or that sort of offer to them around building that mental resilience for themselves, to be able to then have that flow and effect with the work that they do. And so many people leave these jobs even though they're so deeply passionate about it, because they don't see a way out, or a happy medium or a happy solution